The predestined return between nets and secrets. Previously, in the sacred waters of Loch Ness, Alexander came to understand a truth that transcended any adventure for which he had been prepared. That creature sought not confrontation, but refuge. The hatchling they had captured and released had returned, not out of instinct for survival, but with a trust no animal should have for those who had once imprisoned it. And there, in that mutual recognition between species that shared no language, yet shared something far more fundamental, Alexander planted alongside Jacobus Stuart the seed of a legend that would echo through the centuries. The monster of Loch Ness, not as a threat to be destroyed, but as a guardian to be revered. The same force that had defeated the Carthaginian decree, the force that had dissolved confrontation through Helena's silent presence, had demonstrated once more that the world moves not only by the swords of those who conquer, but by the gestures of those who understand. In this new episode, we will discover together how the return to Amesbury will bring more than reunion. It will bring the revelation that Nevem had kept for longer than any living person should be capable of keeping anything. When Alexander casually mentions his alliance with Jacobus Stuart, something dormant within the Druid will awaken. Not surprise, but a memory so ancient it had descended below the level where ordinary memories dwell, into the place where centuries accumulate like layers of sediment that the utterance of a single name can bring back to the surface. Sostrato will reveal the legendary fishing grounds where the ocean teems with abundance that defies any natural explanation. And in that generosity, there will be the quality of universes that prepare those upon whom they will one day depend, fortifying those who will need fortitude. Edith will wait on the cliffside with the patience of one who has transformed waiting into prayer. And at the end of a night of celebration that will gradually become confession, Nevem will pronounce a truth about his own nature that will reshape everything Alexander believed he knew about the boundaries of the possible and about the nature of the purpose that the sea assigned to him before he knew it was possible to have a purpose at all. The sea as witness. There are journeys that transform men, and there are those that reveal them, that scrape away the layers of what they were taught to be and expose what they were always destined to become. Alexander's return to Amesbury was of the second kind. When the Alethea and the Oasis of Moonlight raised their sails homeward, they were no longer mere vessels of wood and canvas. They were living witnesses to ordeals that would challenge the belief of the most hardened skeptics, carrying within each plank of their hulls the memory of seas that had not destroyed those people because something at a level exceeding any available physics to explain it had decided that those people needed to reach the other side. The ocean, in its vastness that human reason describes as infinite because it needs a word for what it cannot measure, seemed to celebrate the courage of those who had dared plunge into its deepest mysteries, offering calm waters with that particular generosity of forces that recognize in those who have passed the trial not mere survivors, but the chosen. Alexander, standing on the deck of the Alethea, felt the wind whispering promises and warnings in equal measure, and he had spent enough time at sea to know that these were not different things. They were the same message spoken from different angles. Helena gazed upon the horizon with eyes that had learned to read not merely the waves, but the designs of destiny with that particular literacy one acquires in no navigation manual that emerges when someone has spent enough time attending to what the world communicates before words intermediate the communication. At her side, Makeda and Amina shared a silence replete with mutual understanding. That stillness born between souls who have faced the impossible together and who therefore dispense with the verbal filling of space because the space between them is already full of shared experience. The Oasis of Moonlight glided across the waters with a grace that defied its recent ordeal, as though the ship had emerged from the trial not damaged but dignified, like veterans who bear their scars not as marks of defeat but as permanent records of having been present where others did not dare. And to you who accompany this crossing, who enter with us this territory where secrets older than human memory are beginning to reveal themselves, I leave a simple but essential request. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your comment sharing what you feel. Every gesture of yours is a flame that joins the others, strengthening the invisible current that unites hearts across time and through the mysteries that await revelation. In doing so, you not only support this work, you become part of this tapestry. The story continues, and it is your presence that keeps the fire alive. So Strato, the navigator whose eyes seemed to see beyond the veil of the visible, approached Alexander with that measured step that always heralded important revelations, not dramatic ones, but precise, like the step of one who has learned that the right moment to say something is as crucial as what is said. His knowledge, accumulated across decades of navigating forgotten routes and conversing with peoples that official history would never record, was like a living map of the ocean's hidden wonders. Not a map drawn on paper that moisture dissolves, but the kind of map that exists only in body and memory, that cannot be stolen or copied, that dies with its bearer if not transmitted at the right moment to the right person. In this moment, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon's embrace, he carried within him the secret of legendary fishing grounds, places where the waters teemed with life in an abundance so generous it defied ordinary logic and bordered on the miraculous. Alexander, recognizing the peculiar gleam in the old navigator's gaze with the familiarity of one who had already learned to read that specific gleam, knew he was about to witness yet another gift that the sea had been holding in reserve for the moment when those who would receive it were ready to receive it. The teeming waters, the ocean's gift. There are places in the ocean that appear on no map because those who know them understand that committing them to paper would be to reduce the sacred to the geographical. Sostrato was one of the few who knew them, and there was a reason he chose to share them now. Sostrato pointed to a specific place on the horizon where the waters seemed to dance with a different luminescence, not the reflection of sunlight, not the bioluminescence of common creatures, but that particular radiance of places where currents from different depths converge, creating a zone of abundance that ordinary fishermen never find because they have never sailed far enough to know it exists. There, he said with the voice of one who has witnessed the impossible enough times to have lost the quality of astonishment without losing the quality of reverence. The ancestral currents meet in eternal embrace, drawing from the abyssal depths the nutrients that nourish creatures in a profusion that few mortal eyes have ever beheld. Alexander ordered both vessels to adjust their course, feeling within himself that they were about to witness something that surpassed the mere need for provisions, that the ocean had prepared this gift specifically for that company at that moment, having already received proof that they were worthy of what was being offered. When the nets were cast for the first time, the silence that descended over the decks carried a religious quality, not imposed, but emerging spontaneously as people perceive they are participating in something that exceeds the act of fishing. Sailors hardened by years at sea held their breath, watching the braided fibers descend into the dark blue depths with that particular attention of moments in which the outcome has not yet been determined, and every second before it is revealed is at once tense and sacred. It took no more than a few moments before the ropes began to strain with a force that drew exclamations of astonishment even from the most seasoned among them. What emerged from the waters defied every expectation. The net was so laden with silver and golden fish that its fibers groaned under the weight. It was as though every creature in the ocean had chosen to offer itself willingly to those voyagers, as though the sea were paying a debt of gratitude for something that had not yet come to pass, but had already been promised. Aboard the oasis of moonlight, the scene repeated itself with equal intensity. Makeda, watching the barrels fill at an impossible speed, felt tears of gratitude touch her face, not of sorrow, but of deep recognition that forces greater than human understanding were weaving their protection around that expedition. Amina murmured prayers in her native tongue with the concentration of one who knows that the words she pronounces matter not through magic, but through intention. That prayer is not petition, but alignment, a way of attuning the heart of the one who prays to the frequency of what is being received. The crew worked with an almost spiritual reverence, understanding that they were not simply fishing, but participating in a cosmic ritual in which the sea chose to feed those it had decided to protect. Alexander had established strict rules long before departure. The purity of the ships was to be preserved as that of a temple. On board, only salted and cured specimens were consumed. Only on solid ground would fresh fish be prepared. This discipline was not mere sanitary precaution, but a philosophy of navigation that his father had taught him and that the journey had confirmed. A clean ship is a blessed ship, and the sea rewards those who honor it in every aspect, not only in the grand gestures of courage, but in the daily details of how one cares for what has been entrusted to one's own responsibility. Cast after cast, the nets returned with abundance that bordered on the absurd. Sostrato watched with a knowing smile. He had witnessed this phenomenon only 3 times in his long life at sea, and on each occasion, those who received such a blessing were destined for deeds that would enter into legend. The ocean recognized its chosen ones, and Alexander, upon hearing Sostrato murmur this almost to himself, felt a shiver travel his spine, not of fear, but of deep understanding that if the sea offered provisions in such abundance, it was because it knew that greater trials still awaited beyond the horizon. This was the eternal pattern. The universe fortifies those who will need fortitude. Responsibility and recognition, the weight of predestination. There are responsibilities that arrive with a label, declared, formalized, recorded. And then there are those others, heavier and more real, that arrive in silence, that settle without ceremony, and that you only discover you have been carrying when you stop moving for a moment and feel the weight. As the oasis of moonlight glided in parallel formation alongside the Alethea, Makeda remained at the mainmast, watching the synchronized dance of the 2 vessels with that quality of observation belonging to those who had learned over the preceding weeks that the most important things that happen rarely make a sound. That ship had survived storms that would have swallowed larger vessels, had withstood winds that would have torn masts away like dry branches, and it held steady and noble still, like a warrior marked by battle but never defeated. Each plank of its hull seemed to tell a story of resistance. Each rope in its rigging sang a hymn of survival that belonged not only to the ship, but to all it had carried. Makeda understood with a crystalline clarity that had been long in coming, but that, once arrived, would no longer permit itself to be questioned, that the oasis of moonlight was not merely a means of transport. It was a living symbol of the trust that Grande Mansa had placed in her capacity to honor commitments that exceeded any contract any scribe could have set down. Amina approached with that gait that seemed to float across the deck, not from physical lightness, but from the quality of presence of one who has learned to occupy the space she occupies without wasting movement. "Makeda," she said in a voice low but firm, "I can feel something different in the eyes of the sailors. It is no longer mere obedience or professional loyalty. It is reverence." Makeda nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in those words. The crew had witnessed not only Alexander's courage, but his capacity to make decisions that defied ordinary logic and led them all to salvation. To recognize that the tacit agreement with the sea creature was worth more than any victory in open battle, to create legend instead of spilling blood, to see that Helena's presence before the Carthaginians was more powerful than any argument any diplomat could have formulated. They had watched a young man transform before their eyes into something that exceeded the category of ship's captain. Alexander, on the deck of the Alethea, felt the weight of that transformation as an invisible mantle across his shoulders. but a mantle that did not oppress, that only reminded him constantly that there was responsibility. He carried now not only Makeda and Amina, entrusted to him by the Grande Mansa, but the growing awareness that every crew member placed in his hands not only their lives, but their hopes. Helena, watching Alexander from the far side of the deck with that attentiveness of those who see what most do not perceive, recognized in him a quality she had observed only in Tiphys, the capacity to make others believe in the impossible simply by believing first, with a faith so solid it became contagious, not because it persuaded, but because it radiated, and radiance needs no argument to reach those near enough to feel its warmth. The sailors worked now with an efficiency that transcended professionalism, adjusting each line, aligning each sail with an almost ritualistic precision. Discipline born not from fear of punishment, but from the recognition that they were part of something that transcended their individual lives, an epic narrative that would be told and retold by generations not yet born. As the sun began to paint the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Alexander gathered mentally all the threads of this complex tapestry his life had become, and he recognized in the most intimate depths of his being that there was no real choice between accepting or refusing that calling, not because he was compelled, but because to refuse it would be to deny the very essence of who he was. How does one refuse to be what one is? How does one turn away from what the sea itself had written into one's blood before any conscious decision could be consulted? The horizon of Amesbury, land in sight. The coastline that emerged on the horizon was not simply a geographical destination. It was a point of convergence where the weeks that had passed and the revelations still to come would, at last, find the place where they could happen. When the first familiar contours of the Amesbury coast began to rise from the line where sky and sea meet, a palpable transformation moved through both vessels with that quality of transformations that announce themselves not in words, but are felt like a shift in atmospheric pressure, subtle, undeniable. It was as though the ships themselves recognized the shore that had watched them depart, like animals that sent home after a long migration. The sailors could not contain the quiet smiles that illuminated faces hardened by salt and wind. Alexander ordered the sails adjusted to slow their approach with that particular wisdom of arrivals that deserved to be savored rather than hastened. For some arrivals are so laden with meaning that to rush them would be to squander precisely what made them meaningful. The rocky cliffs that kept watch over Amesbury like petrified sentinels rose majestically against the sky with that permanence of geological formations that existed before any civilization and will exist long after, that bear witness without judging, that remember without narrating. Helena felt her heart quicken with every meter that drew them closer to shore, not with anxiety, but with that sweet anticipation born when one knows that something profoundly significant is about to happen and that it cannot be hurried, that it can only be received when it arrives. So Strato guided their approach with an expertise that transformed navigation into art, his eyes having beheld 1,000 ports across hundreds of different lands, finding in Amesbury something the other ports did not possess. That ethereal quality of places where the veil between worlds grows thin, where the extraordinary seeps into the ordinary with a regularity that those who paid no attention would never notice, but that those who did could not fail to see. Aboard the oasis of moonlight, Makeda and Amina prepared for disembarkation with meticulous care, not out of vanity, but out of respect for what they represented and for what they were about to encounter. The Grande Mansa had entrusted to them not only a mission, but his reputation and honor. To return fortified by alliances and enriched by experiences that would transform their perspectives forever was a triumph that needed to be met with the appropriate dignity. Not the dignity of titles and garments, but the dignity of character forged in adversity. and emerged more solid than it had entered. Alexander watched the approach with eyes that perceived multiple layers of meaning in every detail. Amesbury was not merely a geographical destination. It was the point where past and future converged, where dormant secrets awaited the right moment to awaken. And he could feel, with that intuition that had grown within him like a muscle that develops with use, that Nevem, whose name had been spoken with reverence even in the distant lands of the Highlands, was a central piece of a puzzle whose full dimensions he was only beginning to glimpse. The Sentinel of the Cliff, Edith and the Waiting. There are those who wait seated, and there are those who transform waiting into vigil, who choose to stand at the highest point they can reach, as though physical height might extend the reach of faith. Edith was of the second kind. It was Helena who saw her first. There, at the highest point of the cliff that commanded the bay, a solitary figure stood motionless as a statue sculpted by nature itself. Motionless not from paralysis, but with that specific stillness of one who has concentrated all available life into her eyes, who is so wholly present in the act of looking that the rest of the body has ceased to matter. Even from a distance, Helena would have recognized that posture anywhere in the world. It was Edith, keeping vigil as she had done countless times before, waiting with a patience that only those familiar with the cruelty of maritime waiting can cultivate, the patience that is not resignation, but active faith, that does not surrender, but remains. The wind lashed Edith's hair, turning it into a wild banner dancing against the sky, but she held firm with that steadiness of those who have decided that no weather would be sufficient to interrupt what they were doing. Helena felt warm tears touch her face, not of sorrow, but of profound emotion upon recognizing that there was someone on solid ground for whom her absence had meant nights of worry and days of persistent hope, that there was someone who had transformed waiting into an act of love. Edith had climbed that cliff every day since the Alethea had disappeared beyond the horizon, not out of habit or superstition, but out of faith made manifest in action. Because faith that does not move is only belief, and Edith had learned, over a life long enough for such learning, that the difference between faith and empty hope is precisely the willingness to do something with what one believes. There, with the sea stretching infinite before her eyes, she spoke to the memories of Tiphys, her sister, Helena's mother, an extraordinary woman whose spirit seemed still to inhabit those waters with that persistence of those who died before they had finished what they had come to do. "Protect her," Edith murmured to the wind, "as I would have protected you if the fates had been otherwise." And in the silence that followed, she imagined hearing answers carried on the salt breeze, whispered promises that Helena was under a protection that transcended the mortal. When Edith finally made out the familiar sails rising on the horizon, her heart seemed simultaneously to stop and to race in an impossible rhythm. For one eternal moment, she could not move, as though she feared that any movement might break the spell and cause the vessels to vanish like a cruel mirage. But then reality asserted itself. It was them, truly them, the Alethea and the oasis of moonlight sailing in majestic formation. Edith let escape a sound that was at once laughter and sob, pure joy mingled with relief so intense it was nearly physical pain, that particular ache of relief belonging to those who have been taught for long enough that the act of releasing is itself an overwhelming sensation. She raised her arms to the sky in a gesture of gratitude to the invisible forces that had guided her niece home, indifferent to who might see her, because some joys are too large to be contained within the limits of social composure, and the attempt to contain them would be an insult to what produced them. Alexander, perceiving the emotional intensity that had overtaken Helena at the sight of Edith on the cliff, approached with that sensitivity that made his leadership exceptional. He needed no words to understand what she felt. "Helena," he said softly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Prepare a dinghy. You need not wait for us to anchor completely. Go to meet the one who awaits you." Helena turned to him with an expression of gratitude that required no verbal acknowledgement, because this simple gesture of understanding and permission revealed, with more eloquence than any speech, why the crew followed Alexander with a loyalty that transcended contracts. He led not through rigid commands, but through deep recognition of the humanity of those under his charge, knowing that certain moments matter more than any anchoring procedure. Reunion, when roots and wings embrace. There are embraces that are only embraces, and there are those that are acts of restoration, that return something that had been taken, that complete something that had been left incomplete, that are at once an arrival and a homecoming. The dinghy touched the sand with a gentleness that contrasted with the urgency that had driven Helena through the waves. She barely waited for the small craft to steady before leaping into the shallows, her boots sinking into the wet sand as she ran toward the figure descending at a run from the rocks. The world around her seemed to slow with that particular quality of moments that memory afterward preserves with absolute clarity. Every grain of sand, every drop of sea foam, every cry of a gull overhead becoming an element of a scene that would be remembered forever with the vividness that the present rarely possesses, but that memory frequently confers retroactively upon the most important moments. Edith and Helena ran toward each other as though magnetic forces were drawing them, as though the entire universe had conspired to make that encounter happen precisely at that moment, in that place, beneath that sky painted in the colors of dusk that silently witnessed the reunion of souls the sea had temporarily parted. When they finally met, the embrace they shared contained within it infinite layers of meaning that no analysis could ever fully exhaust. It was the embrace of aunt and niece, yes, but it was also an embrace between present and past, between the one who had departed and the one who had waited, between courage and faith, between the one who had gone out to sea and the one who had remained so that there would be someone to return to. Edith held Helena as though she feared that loosening her arms might cause her to dissolve, while Helena buried her face in her aunt's shoulder, breathing in that familiar scent that meant home with that precision of aromas that are more than sensory information, that are temporal anchors, that cause the body to remember itself in earlier versions that needed safety in order to exist. From the oasis of moonlight, Makeda and Amina watched the landing with expressions of deep respect, understanding, even without knowing all the details, that they were witnessing something sacred, and that wisdom lay in recognizing when a presence ought to remain at the periphery. When Helena finally drew back far enough to look into Edith's eyes, she saw there a reflection of everything she had felt during the waiting: nights of broken sleep, days of hopeful vigil, prayers whispered to the wind, tears shed in solitude. "Edith," Helena managed to articulate, her voice thick but steady, "I have returned. As I promised, I have returned." Edith cupped Helena's face between her hands, studying each feature like one who is relearning the lines that carry so much of someone who can no longer be seen directly. "You have returned different," Edith observed with the keen perception of one who knows someone deeply enough to notice not only what has changed, but what the change reveals. "You have returned stronger, more whole. The sea did not break you. It forged you." Helena nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in those words with that quality of recognitions that arrive from without and confirm what was already being felt within, but that needed another's voice to become entirely real. It was then that Helena invited Makeda and Amina to come forward, and Edith, displaying a natural hospitality that was not protocol but genuine instinct, embraced them as though they were long-awaited nieces. Makeda, moved by the warmth of the reception, felt tears of her own rising. She who had come from lands so distant was received not as a stranger, but as family. The feast. when the village celebrates its return. Nevem had begun preparations for the feast the day before, without anyone having informed him of the return, without messenger, without smoke signal, without any conventional means of communication. He had simply awakened, looked out to sea, and begun setting the tables. The village of Amesbury had transformed into a stage for celebration that seemed to transcend mere social festivity, not because anyone had declared it should be so, but because the presence of those who had returned produced that effect naturally, like certain moments that need not be proclaimed important to be recognized as such by all who inhabit them. Long tables erected in the central square, covered with cloths that, though simple, carried the dignity of ancestral tradition. Fires crackling at multiple points, their flames dancing as they roasted meats seasoned with herbs that grew only on the sheltered slopes of Amesbury. The aroma of fresh bread mingled with the scent of mead and handcrafted ale, creating an olfactory symphony that communicated, without need for words, that this was a place where people were welcomed back, that this was the kind of community that celebrates returns because it knows what it costs to depart. When Alexander, Helena, Makeda, Amina, and the crew entered the village, they were met with acclamations that echoed between the stone and timber structures with that quality of collective sound that emerges when many people feel the same thing at the same moment. Children ran around them in excited circles, elders waved from their chairs, women scattered petals of wildflowers along the path of the returning voyagers. It was not a reception reserved for military heroes or conquerors. It was a welcome offered to those whom the community recognized as integral parts of its fabric, pieces of its collective soul that had departed and whose return restored an essential wholeness. Alexander felt himself simultaneously honored and humbled, understanding, perhaps for the first time with absolute clarity, that true leadership was not about dominating or controlling, but about belonging and serving. Nevem waited at the center of the square with that particular presence of one who is simultaneously part of and apart from whatever surrounds them. Present, but in a way that suggested his presence was not conditioned by what happened around him, that it existed with the same solidity regardless of context. When his eyes found Alexander's across the crowd, an electric current of recognition passed between them with that quality of recognitions that require no shared history because they operate at a level that precedes history. Recognition of substance, of essence, of two beings who understood simultaneously that the encounter between them was necessary. Alexander, his voice carried that deep resonance that seemed to vibrate not only in the air, but in the very stones beneath their feet. The sea has returned you not merely whole, but transformed. Come, there is much to speak of and still more to celebrate. The feast began with traditional libations, mead poured in, offering to the ancestral spirits that protected Amesbury, prayers whispered in tongues that preceded any written language, ritual gestures that connected that present moment with countless generations that had come before, with that particular efficiency of rituals that function not through magic, but through the collective intention deposited within them repeatedly across generations, until the gesture carries more than the physical gesture itself can contain. Helena, seated between Edith and Makeda, observed everything with new eyes, each element of the ritual acquiring meanings that had previously remained invisible, each ritual gesture revealing itself as a living thread connecting past, present, and future in a resilient tapestry. Amina leaned toward Makeda and whispered, "There is magic in this place. I can feel it in my bones, a vibration that resonates at a frequency only the soul can detect." Makeda nodded thoughtfully. Amesbury was no ordinary village. It was a nexus, a point of convergence where invisible lines of power intersected, where the veil between worlds grew thin enough to allow the extraordinary to seep into the ordinary in ways that only those paying the right kind of attention could perceive. And at the center of that convergence stood Nevem, a figure whose full depths they were only beginning to suspect might be far greater than any surface had ever suggested. Awakened memories, the name that resonates through time. There were things Alexander had not planned to mention. The name of Jacobus Stuart was one of them, and the fact that he mentioned it at that specific moment to Nevem, that was no accident. It was during a natural pause in the celebration, when the noise had subsided to a contemplative murmur, and most of those present were savoring food and drink in contented silence, that Alexander approached Nevem. The Druid was seated slightly apart from the center of the festivities, a position that allowed him to observe everything while maintaining that quality of presence that is felt even at a distance, like a light source that illuminates a space larger than its point of origin. Nevem, Alexander began with a voice carrying the respect that was at once deference and familiarity. There is something I must tell you. During our journey to the Highlands, I forged a great alliance with Jacobus Stuart, the king of those lands. At the mention of the name, Alexander perceived a subtle shift in Nevem's expression with that capacity for observation he had developed over months of attending to what people communicate before words. It was not surprise, it was activation. It was the specific expression of doors that open not because someone pushed them, but because the right key was used. Nevem remained silent for a moment that seemed to extend beyond its natural temporal limits. His eyes, which normally shone with alert attention to the present, turning inward, excavating layers of memory stacked at depths that Alexander was only intuitively beginning to suspect. Jacobus Stuart, he repeated at last with a voice that sounded distant as an echo rising from a deep well that holds more water than any bucket could reach. That name carries the weight of a history that transcends mere familiarity. Understand, Alexander, Nevem began slowly, choosing his words with the care of a craftsman selecting the precise tool for delicate work, that as a healer, my function transcends the social distinctions others consider absolute. The king who bleeds receives the same care as the beggar who stumbles. Life is life, sacred in all its manifestation, indifferent to the titles that human society chooses to confer. He paused with that particular pause of one who is deciding how much to reveal, not out of evasion, but from the wisdom of one who has learned that the pace of a revelation is as important as its content. But now that you speak this name in a context that compels more precise remembrance, yes, I recall. There was a Jacobus Stuart, a monarch of impressive stature, not merely physical, but of a presence that commanded instinctive respect. He anchored his ships in the lowlands, something uncommon for a king, demonstrating an urgency that transcended the normal protocol of a royal visit. They climbed the trails to Amesbury, carrying riches that would have made less disciplined eyes gleam. The purpose of that extraordinary journey, Nevem continued, his eyes fully focused, yet seeing through Alexander to a scene unfolding in the theater of his memory, was a child, the monarch's son, stricken by an illness that had defied every healer Jacobus had consulted across his vast lands. Each of them, when admitting the limits of their own knowledge, had pronounced the same name, Nevem, the mystic of Amesbury. Jacobus offered me all those riches without hesitation, without bargaining. It was not negotiation. It was the supplication of a desperate father willing to give everything he possessed for the life of his son. The Druid paused, allowing the weight of those memories to settle with that dramatic precision of revelations that need not be forced because the content itself carries all the necessary weight. I healed the child, and Jacobus departed. Another pause. That was far longer ago than your eyes suggest it would be possible for me to remember with this clarity. Alexander felt understanding begin to form in his mind with that quality of comprehensions that do not arrive all at once, but in progressive waves, each wave revealing more than the one before, the complete picture only becoming visible once enough waves had come. Jacobus Stuart, the man he had met, appeared to be approximately the same age as Nevem, but if Nevem had treated Jacobus when the man was a sick child, then Alexander looked at Nevem with eyes widened by growing comprehension. The druid met his gaze and nodded slowly, silently confirming the suspicions that were beginning to take shape like a mist that gradually thickens until it becomes a substance that can be touched. Revelation, the man who stopped time. There are truths that arrive as a blow, and there are those that arrive as recognition, that the body processes as confirmation of something it already knew, but had never found the means to fully name. The silence that followed was dense with implications that challenged everything Alexander, Helena, Makeda, and Amina considered possible within the limits of known reality. Nevem watched them with an expression that mingled compassion and resignation, the expression of someone who has carried a heavy secret for a length of time exceeding any duration that any ordinarily living person would carry anything, and who has at last found the appropriate moment to share a burden with others worthy of knowing it. I see in your eyes that you are beginning to understand a truth that few living souls know. Yes, I treated Jacobus Stewart when he was a child, and yes, if that Jacobus still lives, he has aged naturally through the decades while I have remained. He extended his hands before him, studying them as though they were the possessions of a stranger that time had given him without his having fully requested them. These hands have not changed. This body has not declined. This heart beats with the vigor of a young man, though it has witnessed centuries unfold like endless scrolls. Helena was the first to find her voice, though the words came in a reverent whisper that was at once a question and a hesitation before an answer that might be larger than the space available to receive it. How? How is this possible? Are you immortal? Nevem shook his head with a gesture containing the complex nuances of simultaneous negation and affirmation. The negation that the label fully captured the reality, the affirmation that the reality exceeded what the available label could describe. Immortal suggests an inability to die, and I do not believe that is the case. I can still be wounded. I still bleed when cut. I still feel pain. But time decided, or was persuaded, to pass around me without touching me, like a river that flows around a stone firmly planted in its bed. He paused beneath the weight of memories that extended beyond ordinary comprehension. It was a choice, a decision made in a moment of absolute clarity about purpose and responsibility. There was knowledge that needed to be preserved, wisdoms that could not be lost when my natural generation passed, and so I asked, implored, demanded of the forces that govern existence that they allow me to remain, to endure, to serve across the ages. Makeda, whose royal lineage had taught her since childhood about legends of beings who transcended ordinary mortality, leaned forward with that mixture of awe and fascination that emerges when something that has always been legend is suddenly seated at the same fire as you. And those forces simply complied? Nevem laughed, a low, mirthless sound that carried echoes of a loneliness so profound it made the laughter seem more like lamentation. Nothing is simple when it comes to defying the natural order of things. There was a price, there is always a price. I remained young in body, but I watched all those I loved grow old and depart. I formed bonds with countless generations, only to see them vanish like flowers that bloom and wither in endless cycles. I knew children who became respected elders, who had children of their own, who also aged beneath my eternally young gaze. The knowledge I preserve it in a solitude that few can truly comprehend. Amina, ever perceptive in matters of spiritual nature, touched the heart of a question they all harbored but hesitated to voice. Why choose to carry so heavy a burden? What knowledge is worth the sacrifice of living truly, of aging naturally alongside those you love? Nevem's eyes met hers, and in that gaze there were depths of purpose that transformed sacrifice into sacred vocation, that revealed there was a kind of love that does not express itself in closeness. but in the preservation of what others will need even after you are no longer present to guide them. Because there are wisdoms easily lost in the passage between generations, there are healing arts that take decades to master completely, understandings about the balance between body, mind, and spirit that vanish when there is no living master to transmit them. I chose to be that guardian, that living bridge between past and future, so that vital knowledge would not be lost to oblivion. Alexander felt himself simultaneously humbled and elevated by this revelation, as one does when encountering something that entirely exceeds any available frame of reference for understanding it, yet which the body recognizes instinctively as real and important before the mind has finished its processing. Intertwined destinies and the price of knowledge. There are revelations that close questions, and there are those that open territories, that show that the map you had been using to navigate the world was only a sketch of something far greater, and that the exploration of the real begins precisely where the sketch ends. Nevem's revelation hung over the group like a mist that transforms familiar landscape into territory where every detail must be seen again with eyes that already know more than they knew before. Helena looked at the druid with eyes that saw simultaneously the man she had known all her life, and the stranger whose true depths she was only beginning to glimpse, the specific experience of discovering that the person you believed you knew was, in truth, far greater than the image you had formed, and that the greatness had not been concealed through dishonesty, but because the scale exceeded what any surface observation could detect. Edith, who had approached silently during the conversation, stood still with an expression suggesting that perhaps she had always known, that certain signs that attentive observers detect over the course of years, the way Nevem always seemed to possess knowledge of events before they were widely known, how his memories of past generations carried a clarity impossible for mere inherited knowledge, how his appearance had remained unchanged while all around him marked the passage of time. Those signs had been there, for those with eyes to see them. Makeda and Amina exchanged glances laden with silent meaning, with that communication between those who have shared enough time for the silence between them to carry more than most conversations. The Grande Mansa, in his legendary wisdom, had sent them to forge alliances that would benefit his kingdom for generations. But now they understood that perhaps there were deeper layers of purpose in that mission, layers that not even the Grande Mansa had fully articulated, but that he had perceived through that intuition which characterizes great leaders, the capacity to act in the present in response to patterns that only the future will reveal completely. To connect with Alexander, to ally with one predestined to command the seas, and through him to find Nevem, guardian of a knowledge that transcended ordinary mortality. It was a tapestry of purpose whose full magnificence was only beginning to reveal itself. Amina murmured a prayer of gratitude and recognition that forces greater than human comprehension had guided their steps to precisely where they needed to be. Alexander moved slightly away from the group, needing the space that only the edges of spaces offer. He walked to the border of the square, where he could see the ocean stretching infinite beyond the cliffs. The stars above reflected in the dark waters, creating the illusion of two mirrored universes with humanity caught precariously between them. His hands pressed against the cold stone of the low wall as his mind worked through the implications with that intensity that is not anxiety, but genuine processing of something that exceeds the available frameworks. If Nevem had stopped in time, what other impossibilities awaited discovery? What truths about the nature of reality remained hidden, awaiting those with the courage and the appropriate destiny to uncover them? And what would be the price, for there was always a price, of such knowledge? Helena approached silently, positioning herself at his side without speaking at first, with that presence of those who understand that some moments require no verbal filling to be shared. Tiphys, my mother. Helena finally spoke, her voice soft but clear against the sound of distant waves. Used to say that the sea chooses certain ones to carry its deepest secrets, that such chosen ones could never live ordinary lives. For once the ocean truly touches someone's soul, that person is marked forever. She turned to look at Alexander directly. You have been touched, Alexander, more deeply than most will ever be. And now, with Nevem's revelation, I understand that my own journey is intertwined with yours in ways that go beyond simple companionship on a maritime expedition. Sostrato, who had observed the entire revelation from a respectful distance with that discretion of those who know when their function is to witness and not to participate, finally approached. I have sailed the seas for most of my long life, and I have learned that the ocean operates according to laws that transcend ordinary human comprehension. I have seen things that would make rational men question their sanity, waters that glow with their own light, creatures that seem to exist partly in our reality and partly in another, islands that appear and vanish as though they were less physical places and more states of consciousness. He looked directly at Alexander. You are destined to explore those frontiers where the natural and the supernatural meet, and you will need all of us, Nevem with his timeless wisdom, Helena with her inherited courage, Makeda and Amina with their own connections to ancestral powers, to navigate waters that still have no maps. Nevem then spoke the final words of that night with a voice that resonated in the stones. There is an ancient prophecy that speaks of an age when the chosen of sea, land, and sky will converge to face the awakening of something ancient, something that has slept for ages beyond counting. Some interpret this as metaphor, but I, who have watched centuries unfold, know that certain prophecies must be taken literally. A pause carrying the weight of an affirmation that requires no elaboration because its magnitude is self-evident. Nets full to impossibility, a druid who defied time to preserve knowledge, a young man predestined to command the oceans, women from distant lands guided by a visionary king, a navigator who knows forgotten routes. These are not coincidences. They are threads being woven into a tapestry whose complete pattern we are only beginning to discern. And the price we will pay for unraveling these mysteries will be measured not in gold or blood, but in transformations of soul that will leave us forever changed, forever aware that reality is far vaster, far stranger, and far more wondrous than ordinary humanity ever dreams. In the next episode, Nevem's revelation of immortality is not a point of arrival, it is an opening. Because if Nevem chose to remain in order to preserve knowledge the world would need, then the moment that knowledge is summoned was also awaited, also foreseen, also part of a pattern that someone sufficiently ancient could have seen approaching. And the prophecy he mentioned, the chosen of sea, land, and sky converging to face the awakening of something that has slept for ages, begins to acquire, in the light of what each of them has lived, the quality not of poetic metaphor, but of a map. The fountain of remembrances in Amesbury awaits, and Nevem, who guarded his secret for centuries, waiting for the right moment to reveal it, revealed it precisely now, which means the right moment has come. What awakens when the time is right does not await human convenience. It simply awakens. And those who were prepared to receive that awakening will need everything they have learned, on African seas and rivers, on the stages of royal banquets, and on the shores of sacred lakes, on nights beneath auroras that diagnose potentials, and on mornings after storms that forge rather than destroy. The journey toward Excalibur continues, and Excalibur, it turns out, has always been waiting for precisely them.